Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Social Work 12 podcast. I'm Taylor here with my co-host Faith, and we have some amazing guests today from Payment for Placements. So
Yes.
we have a lot to talk about today. I'm so excited. We're talking about social workers getting paid for their work.
hmm
Period. Like
This needs to happen.
why? Yeah, I'm just like, why is this even a conversation that we even need to have? This is unfortunate. But I'm gonna have our two guests introduce themselves. So,
Hi everyone, my name is Pilar Bonilla, and I am P4P Nationals emotional support alum. And I'm also part of the Advocacy Alliance along with Aiden. And pronouns she, her, ella, of course, social working. And thank you for having me.
love it.
Yeah, and I'm Aiden Bondurant. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the co-founder and co-lead with Pilar for the P4P Advocacy Alliance. And I'm an organizational social worker based in the Midwest and did my master's out at University of Kansas and Columbia University in New York and excited to be here.
Awesome. Faith and I were talking, and we're just curious about just the start of all of this. And have you guys been doing it since the beginning? You've been involved? Or just like, give us the
It's like the origin
timeline.
story. Like, how
Yeah.
did this all start?
Yeah.
Well, I have been involved since 2022, and I started at my local chapter at Columbia University in New York, and that's how I eventually got linked over to the national group, and it just kind of snowballed from there. But I know that Pilar has been involved earlier than I have, and so I'd love for her to share her experience.
I was actually thinking, like, what year, right? I think, yeah. So I started obviously when I was a student my first year. And I was part of a group called the Silberman Student Advocacy Collective. I went to Hunter College, Silberman School of Social Work in New York City. And we were thinking of like one of the things we need to advocate is for paid internships. And then we were made aware that there was a group in New Michigan that were doing the same thing. So we contacted them, and that's how we got involved in payment for placements. And I believe that was what, 2021 or 2022. Uh, I think I started in 2021. Huh. But so our chapter, P4P Hunter College Women's School of Social Work, we were one of the first 10 original P4P national chapters. From there, I felt that we would be heard more if we started a coalition, a New York-based coalition, which is how I met a lot of other students from Columbia, NYU, Fordham, like Stony Brook, etc. And I think we were the first P4P national coalition, and now that same coalition in New York is trying to get a bill passed so that all social work students will be paid.
That's awesome.
Wow. In New York or just all in the country?
In New York, if we could do
Okay.
it federally, trust me, we would.
Right.
Long overdue, but it has to start somewhere, right?
No, definitely.
Well,
What, what
yeah.
was it about this movement that was inspiring to you guys or just, made you want to be a part of it?
I think that for me, it started before I even knew about P4P, and as I was entering into the field of social work, because I have a different career history in clinical research before I went into the field of social work. I was, getting to know people, fellow students. One of my best friends was a social worker who had kind of made me more aware of what the field of social work and especially macro social work can look like. And I was talking to one of my friends, and she was telling me about her practicum experience and how she was working these long hours providing, counseling services. And there was billing that was happening for those services, but she was not receiving any type of compensation. And I was like, that just doesn't sound right. And as I got to know other students at a number of universities, I found this common theme of like many students having not the best experiences as part of their practicum, placement, but also they were doing work that these nonprofits were really reliant on and dependent on, but they weren't being compensated like people who were doing the same or similar work around them within the same organization. And so that kind of sat wrong with me, but I didn't have a lot of people in my circle who were really advocating for change. And when I went to Columbia and I met other students and had heard about the new chapter that was opening in 2022 for P4P at Columbia, I was like, this is great. Other people really want to make a change in this area, and it has to start at all the levels, the university level, the agency level, local, state, national. You have to be able to activate all of those networks. And so I was really excited to be a part of that chapter. And then once I graduated with my MSW, I thought, students who are investing not just all this energy and time into school and family and coursework and practicum time, they're also dedicating time to advocacy in the P4P movement. And we need more than just students who are really engaged in this advocacy work for students and honestly for the social work profession as a whole. And so that's where me and Pilar partnered up with others to really create this advocacy alliance that has non-student advocates who may have access to more time, energy, resources, potentially funding, influence, power, all of the things that can really effectively affect change to be able to advocate for these students.
That's amazing. Pilar, what kind of got you passionate about joining this organization? Maybe like as a student and then afterwards?
I was personally impacted, and so were friends. One thing that was really surprising to me when I started my social work journey was that a lot of the students around me didn't look like me. There were very few Black and brown students in my program when I started. And then that number just lowered. And at that time, one of the first campaigns that I was part of was the hours alignment campaign, which is what we called it because in New York you had to do 1,200 hours at your unpaid internship on top of like coursework and all this stuff. And it was impossible, or felt like almost impossible to do. And it was like 21 hours a week plus 3 hours mandatory lunch break, 24 hours. I know I graduated doing a lot more than the 1,200 hours. And I think when it really hit me was when my friend dropped out of the program. And she said to me, like, Pilar, it's not doable. How can they make us pick
Mhm.
between getting a social work education and our need to work? How are we supposed to put a roof over our head, food on the table, clothing on our backs? Like, how is that even something that we have to pick? And I think that really resonated with me at that time. I was thinking of dropping out myself because it was a lot. It was a lot, On top of that, your agency can be as far as 2 hours away. So adding the commute time and the money that you spend on commuting, it was a lot. And I was feeling very alone. And the few friends I had made at that time were dropping out, and I didn't feel that it was fair. And so then I said, like, okay, let me join more students who also feel the same way. And we decided first thing to do was the hours alignment campaign, which lowered the mandatory hours from 1,200 to 900. So most New York schools now are doing the CSWE recommend 900 hours. Certain schools, Lehman, still haven't caught up, um, and they're doing their students a disservice. But, you know, stop. They need to stop doing that to students. So that was step one. And that campaign actually lasted just this year. It was implemented. So after I graduated, but it's something that like my cohort started. and it happened. But the end goal has always been payment for placements.
Yeah,
For
one thing,
sharing that. That's
yeah,
really great. Yeah.
I feel like
Hmm.
both of you guys talking about your experiences, just kind of recognizing how big of a problem this is. It just feels so contradictory to like the social work values and things that we learn, like when Aiden was
Hmm.
talking about hearing her friend essentially being exploited at her internship. That's something that we talk about, in school and how we can push back on organizations and systems that like exploit vulnerable population and exploit, our community. And yet we're doing it to ourselves, we're doing it to each other, and
Mm.
then Pilar talking about your friend, how am I supposed to pay for my house and my and food when I have to go to this internship? Why are you making me choose? We talk about self-care in social work. What kind of self-care is that when you have to
Mm.
choose between education on wanting to, better yourself and help your community, but you can't afford the things that would benefit you? You know what I mean? It just feels
Yeah.
so insanely problematic. And how did we get this far
Yeah.
with allowing it? It's really disappointing.
Yeah. And just to go off of what you're saying, Taylor and Pilar, like I can hear the pain when you're sharing your story. Like this isn't an easy decision for people to make. This is a painful decision, right? To be have this choice in front of you. Like, how do you choose between your livelihood and your passion and really feeling like you want to help? And a lot of us are driven by our personal stories of wanting to help. And so it's just this really painful process. And also, like, talking about who gets exploited, overworked, underpaid, vulnerable populations, which are students
Hmm.
and who when there's power dynamics too. And so I just think it's actually incredible that students who are dealing with that amount of pressure then somehow in their busy lives found the time to advocate for themselves. And so I just I'm like in awe of what you guys have created. And honestly, if this existed when I was a student, I would have totally joined. Like
Hmm.
Taylor and I talk about that all the time. Like we had to work our butts off of like working 3 or 4 jobs and like doing our internship because you have to make a living too, right? Um, and then Aiden, I love how you brought up realizing that and seeing how students don't have time always to advocate for what they need. And so expanding that outside of just students is brilliant. So the next question that we have for you guys is what are some of the biggest challenges you've faced in advocating for paid internships? So like you've started this movement, you're involved, right? What are some of those big challenges that you've faced in this process?
I would say some of the biggest challenges is really changing some people's attitude around the value and worth of students within organizations, and that, you know, it's not just about, I mean, students need to be paid because they are providing labor most often in these
Yes.
roles. And people really try to shy away from acknowledging that. And if there's any type of gray area, they're like, well, it's not labor. And I'm like, it in a lot of fields, you hire an entry level professional and you train them as a part of days, weeks, months of their onboarding, and you invest in them for the organization and for the field. And that's something that I think a lot of people just have a hard time with, or really the whole notion that this is the way it's always been. And I had to be grateful for the opportunities I had, even if it wasn't paid. And I just had to tough it out. And I'm like,
Mm.
it's
I hate
great
that
that
stuff
you,
so
I
much. Oh
hate
my
that.
gosh.
I can't believe that's still being said.
I know. It's like there are awful things that used to be that we changed because we realized that's not how we should do it. Just like that
yeah.
that idea of this is how it's always been. Okay.
If you're saying this is the way it's always been done, that should be an immediate indicator that you should maybe reevaluate if things should change. And, I just feel like many people are like, this is the way it's always been done. And so why should we change it? And I just think, it's great that you had the opportunity. And I'm one of these people. I had the opportunity to not work while I was doing school and having my practicum. And I was able to do that. But I know many people aren't able to do that. And think of all of the amazing, beautiful, wonderful people who would be amazing social workers who can't even feasibly consider it because they just see, oh, I'm going to have to take out all these student loans, do all this coursework and the homework and the practicum, and I'm probably not going to be able to work. And if they had kids or were caregivers for other people in their lives, like parents or other family, it's just not feasible. And they don't even enter the field, or they try to enter and then they fail out. That's so incredibly painful. So, I feel like those are some of the biggest barriers. And then really funding. Some of the things that we hear a lot about are from organizations or from professionals in organizations. Well, how do we even find the money to be able to pay students? And that is a tough issue that can be resolved and needs to be challenged, but that comes to the root of budgets being built. When funding is being requested, are they requesting funding to fund the students that are going to be working on those projects? Are they billing appropriately to fund those students? It takes those macro social work professionals, or there's those other types of administrators really being aware and involved in the effort to get students paid and to understand that inherent value of students. Because not only are you investing in the workforce and in the profession, but students bring this new vision and perspective to workplaces. They ask hard questions. They, try to analyze situations and can improve programs just by asking those questions and being involved. So there's a lot of barriers, but they can be overcome.
Yeah, it's everything that Aiden said. And I think the only two things I would add is people not being able to do the math as being one of them. And it's what Aiden said, right? Like people are like, well, I worked for free, like I had to do it, you have to do it too. And it's like, well, ma'am, my apologies, but things aren't the same thing as they were 40 years ago. Also, when we graduate, we are compete as interns, we're competing against our future selves. If you have somebody that you could pay zero, right? Why would you start somebody who recently graduated at a higher level when you're getting the labor for free?
Fascinating.
And so it's like, how do people not realize that this impacts them even though they're no longer students? Like, this is common sense to me. And then when I also get the pushback of like, oh, we shouldn't be focused on like advocating for ourselves. We have to focus on our clients and our communities and da 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 this and that. And I'm like, okay, yes, but do you realize that when you're accepting that your worth and your value is zero, you're accepting that for the clients and communities that you're working with. So how is that math like? I don't. I guess my issue is, how do people not see that math? Because it's so common sense to me. And I guess the second thing is, I call myself the emotional support alum because I have spoken to students all over the US who have said to me, like, I can't do this anymore. I came into social work because I thought everything it stands for. But I see the hypocrisy. I see how they tell us to do one thing. They teach us to do one thing, and then we have to do another in the real world. They teach us to critically think. They teach us to advocate. But when we try, they shut us up. I can't do this. I can't be part of a profession, of a practice that is so hypocritical. And then it's like, how do I respond to that, right? And part of me wants to tell him it's going to get better. That's why those of us need to be part of it. But the other part of me, it's like, you know what? You do what you need to do. Give yourself some grace. If you need to take a break, then do it. And I wish sometimes that these people who are making these budget decisions or accreditation, I wish they heard all this stuff, because if they did, maybe they would find time to think of students as important, because they are important.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
I'm curious about your guys' experience with, Faith and I in this podcast, just in general. It's about, social work and money and just all and how that is such a weird pairing, because of our negative conversations around money and social work and how it's not something that we should be focused on. You know, we're here for our clients, it's not about us. So I'm just curious if those are comments that you guys have heard or what other kind of conversations or comments you've heard from people in relation to this like pairing of, social work and money.
I think one of the phrases I hate the most is nobody goes into social work for the money. And it's almost like they're asking you to choose. But that's not how it works. One thing that we learn in human behavior is that it doesn't have to be either or, it could be yes and.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that in mind, yes, I'm social working, the verb, right? I'm social working because I want to help my community. But I also, and actually not but, and I also want to make more than the cost of living, have great health care, and not be exploited. And
Yep.
those things do not have to be the opposite. They can go
Mm-hmm.
hand in hand. Humility does not equal poverty. People need to get that out of their mind.
Oh, oh my gosh, I just got
I
chills.
I love that.
I was thinking,
Yes.
say it again.
Humility does not equal poverty. That is,
And
yeah.
I think we've had other guests say like social workers didn't take a vow of poverty.
Mm-hmm.
And like we haven't. Pilar, I loved what you said also about because this is what Taylor and I are trying to do is uplift the profession as a whole, share stories like yours and Aiden like yours and what you guys are doing to bring a voice to this because Taylor and I are like, where are social workers talking about this? I don't know. You guys are though. And so we wanted to bring you guys on to talk about this, to elevate the profession as a whole. And also, you know, I loved the point you made about if you're getting paid zero, social workers then are going to get paid very low when they
Yeah.
enter the profession. And that's what Taylor and I both experienced. And I'm sure other social workers are experiencing right now. And so it's about saying social workers have value and they have worth. And we in society value through monetary, we show what we value through pay. And so it's kind of this interesting point you made. I love it because it needs to start with students. Because then also psychologically, you're like, well, I didn't make anything in my internship. So like 45,000 sounds great. And you're like, really, we can't live off of $45,000. Like,
No.
I don't know who can. So I loved that point. I thought that was great. Um, can you guys talk a little bit about some of the, just to kind of flip gears here, the success stories or milestones that the P4P movement has achieved so far?
Yeah. What are you guys really proud of?
I mean, I can say I'm proud of just P4P being in existence at all. When we've, talked about how students are already so overburdened with work, school, home life, all of the things. And for this movement to be generated by students in their I want to say free time, but their lack of free time, they prioritize this over probably other things that were very meaningful for them because it mattered so much. And so there are I think there's 57 chapters around the country of P4P, and we have all of this action taking place on the local level, but also at the national level. And now we've got these non-student advocates who are getting involved. And so I'm really proud of students being able to get together. I'm really excited for the people who aren't students who are now getting really engaged in big and in small ways. But also that the abbreviation and our movement P4P is starting to get more well known, which isn't just like a great thing for our group, but for the effort to get social work students paid. Now, people know when they hear P4P, it's the concept of getting students paid to be able to lift up the profession and to be able to better serve clients and the communities that we're supporting. So I'm just really proud of P4P being in existence. And the things we've been able to accomplish so far. But Pilar, what do you think?
I'm proud of all of us at P4P Advocacy Alliance member as well as students because we are doing the work. We're not just talking about it and like giving ourselves a pat on the back. Good job. No, we are actually doing the work. We are social working. This is part of social work, advocating for ourselves so that we can advocate for our clients. So I'm proud that we're having this discussion right now. And I'm proud to everybody who that has joined in any way possible or is helping, whether they can't make it, let's say, to an Advocacy Alliance meeting, but they can help in other ways, even if it's info sharing, you know. I'm proud to be a social worker. I'm proud to be part of payment for placement. And I'm proud of how big this has gone. And we have friends that we have connected with internationally too. We have the Australian group, which is what's it called? Do you remember their name? It was SAP, Students Against Placement Poverty. I love them. And they were actually one of the reasons why the Advocacy Alliance came through because we love their model and they were, they had a student movement and then they had a movement that was made up of like professors, um, all these political forces, everybody in every level. And they were able to get in Australia like national stipends for all social work students. And that's just the beginning. New Zealand is doing something like that as well. They have was it payment or paid out Otera. Then we also have people in Wales. We have people internationally who are also doing this work. And I think that says a lot about what social work is and what we
Hmm.
stand for and our values.
Wow. Yeah. And it shows me also money is that important to us, you know, and not in a negative way, but like you said, Aiden, we're trading our labor for money. That is essentially what we have to do in this society to survive.
Mhm.
Um, and the fact that we have so many students, people abroad, like this, our financial wellness and our financial being is so important to us being able to show up as healthy practitioners and just being healthy humans in general. And so
Mm.
it's not surprising that there's a lot of movement on this and involvement because this is a serious issue, like this is that important to us. And so I just hope that other people who are the decision makers can see that too. Um, I'm curious about earlier, Pilar, you had mentioned the New York bill, and I, I mean, this is like my own curiosity in terms of I've never been involved in anything like that in terms of getting something moved through, legislation and just like that is huge. Where, where does someone even start with that? Like, what does that even look like?
Well, luckily, we've had other chapters in other states do this before us, maybe like on a smaller level. There's like three more states.
Hmm.
And so in New York, we decided we want to take the universalist approach. We're all students, all social work students should get paid. And we put everything together in a slide, the reasons, how it benefited the state, how this is an investment, which it is, just in case anybody in New York is hearing. It's a huge investment because social workers are everywhere and they're needed. And with this shortage coming up, now is the time. If you invest in social work, in the social work workforce now, you will be doing the state a huge favor later. Like this is all this I call it the trickle up effect, right? When you pay interns, social work interns, you see the money, you will see the money. And right now we have a bill sponsor. It's going to hopefully be heard. And we're really excited about it. But we are not the first ones to do it, and
Hmm.
it's possible.
Yeah.
I would say that, the two founders of Payment for Placements movement back in 2021 were from the University of Michigan, and they were a critical part of legislation in the state of Michigan being passed to support the payment of social work students that were in their foundation practicums in public schools. And so that was huge. That was a huge win that kind of helped boost the P4P movement and set that example and show that when you're a student, like when you're in class learning about advocacy, ask questions about issues that, of course, matter and are important to the communities that you're going to be serving. But you are also a part of a community, and that's a student community and a social work professional community. And so ask questions around advocacy there, because while you're in school, you can make the connections, build a network, and gain the confidence to be able to do that advocacy. And you don't have to wait until you're graduated. You could do it while you're in school. And, as I've been a part of the P4P movement, I've just seen that there are a lot of people, a lot of students who are just motivated enough and had that extra sliver of time and energy to be able to ask the hard questions, and were in positions where they were able to safely ask those questions and push things. And so that's where I always like to tell people, I'm like, if you have any amount of privilege or power or influence, use it to be able to ask hard questions, push these issues, and to keep being that, nagging, sometimes annoying voice to really be like, hey, this needs to change. This isn't okay. What's being done about it? And I don't know exactly what I'm doing, but I'm going to find other people who may have more experience in this area of advocacy, and we're going to try to change something at the state level. I feel like that's a lot of what's involved.
Definitely. I
I
would say privilege and public shaming. Let's not like, I just want to add that in there because sometimes you don't have the privilege. But I believe in calling institutions in, so as well as out. Uh, if something doesn't get done, I will tag them on social media. Not just myself, but like a whole bunch, and I will get that, repost or whatever. It's like, why? Why is it that students are being treated this way? So, yeah, if you have the privilege and if you have the capacity, the group, the amount of people that you need, and how to use digital marketing, social media advocacy, any way you can, do it.
I love that.
you guys are kind of already talking about it, but I think students who are watching this, or anyone who wants to start a chapter at their university, or wants to maybe kind of get a bill passed at the state level, what kind of strategies did you guys maybe use or kind of pull in to build momentum, to establish chapters on so many different, universities? You're kind of alluding to it a little bit right now, like networking, maybe some tagging of people who said they would commit to things but aren't following through on what they said they would, kind of exposing some of the hypocrisy, things like that. But what would you say to students who they're listening to this and they want to do this, but they're like, gosh, how do I even get started?
Give yourselves grace and give others grace. I think that is the first thing I will say. I was that annoying student, but I was also that student that would ask, it wouldn't just be about paid placement. I would ask, hey, what do you think about what we just learned in class, about this theory? How is that applied? Like, get the conversation going, just start talking. The people that you're in classes with, they are the people that these are your future colleagues. I think somebody once said your network is your net worth. And so, like, never underestimate anybody. You're worth a lot, and so are all these people around you. And maybe the conversation might not start around P4P, but it will start around something else. And don't give up on people, and realize that people have lives, that they have, like, I have elderly parents I take care of, or they have children, or they have like a dog, whatever. They have, it's not easy, and it's okay. So you might have active organizers, and then you might have organizers who will be there, they'll sign the petition, and if there's a rally, they will show up. And that's also okay. Give yourself and give others grace.
Yeah, I think that's some great things to consider because it is taxing on you and the
Mhm.
people that you're organizing with. It's going to be kind of exhausting, but just keep extending yourself grace, like Pilar was saying, is huge. And I would say, just as Pilar was hitting on, identify people in your networks, students and non-students who you think are invested in students getting paid. And that starts with asking questions, starting conversations, doing that in class. If there's an opportunity in class, do it in class. And most likely, 5 to 10 to 20 other people will be like, yeah, you're
Mhm.
right. And then you start identifying these people. And then you have to kind of get out of your comfort zone sometimes. And you have to go up to someone individually and be like, hey, this matters to me and I see it matters to you. Do you want to go grab coffee and we can talk about this more? And
Yes.
most likely they will do it. And so once you have that, even if it's a small group of people, get that group of people together, assess what capacity is, because you want to be realistic. You don't want to burn everyone out from the beginning, which is tough. And that happens in advocacy groups sometimes. Is that they get super excited and then they put too much capacity towards it and then it's just too much, which is totally understandable. But assess capacity. And then we, of course, encourage groups that are interested in advocating for paid student placements to reach out to P4P National, our website, paymentforplacements.org. There is a section of the website that has information about our onboarding and orientation meetings that we hold once a month. And it's not just great to learn about the P4P movement, but then you get connected with other chapters around the nation who are doing the same thing you are, who are going to face the same challenges, and will be able to give you advice, give you like emotional support. Like Pilar was saying, she's an emotional support alum because this is a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
Um, yeah, but also we say, do surveys. So when I was a part of the Columbia chapter, a big thing we did in concert with other New York City chapters was do a survey that went straight to students and just asked them, like, what has your practicum experience been? Are you getting paid? Are you reliant on programs to be able to have food on the table all the time? Are you caregiving for other people? Are you feeling like you're having a good educational experience because you're having to juggle all of these things? And once we were able to collect the data specific to Columbia students, we were able to present that to deans at Columbia University School of Social Work. And then we're able to, in collaboration with the deans, we're able to create a joint faculty student task force that met monthly or quarterly to be able to brainstorm, okay, where do we start in being able to get students paid? And sometimes you got to start small. And so one of the small things was, talking to administrators about, do we ask practicum sites and agencies, organizations, do you pay students or could you pay students? Simply the question kind of starts this like thinking of, well, we don't, but I guess we could, and it opens the door. So, celebrate those small wins, but then know, like Pilar was saying, when to exert some pressure, healthy pressure, and extend grace not just to yourself, but to others, because it's political, it's challenging. There's lots of tensions you need to kind of juggle, but that's why I like to put pressure on people who aren't students, who aren't in those compromised positions of being in the learning experience actively, to really find ways to find funding, to even start small in getting these students paid.
That's
Love
great. So it
that.
sounds like networking not only with like fellow students, but then also professors or faculty on your campus, and then also nationally with other chapters, going to your, website and kind of learning from maybe people who have been successful on their chapter or on their campus legislatively, or also just to get paid internships, and then also advocating, with different placement internship organizations, and just by starting that conversation, even by asking the question, that's really helpful to hear kind of different steps people can take.
Yeah, I
That's
love
great.
that. And I think the giving yourself grace is just,
Yeah.
it's so big in all the work that we do. And I think there's another level to this advocacy that it can get so tiring. And especially like I've experienced this in one of my workplaces where you're not seeing any movement, so maybe you did get discouraged, and that kind of wears on you, and you're not getting paid in your internship, and you're tired, and you have to work, and there's just so many competing factors. So yeah, starting the conversation, but also being realistic about your expectations and your goals, and um I I love that. You guys are badass. Let
You
me just
really
say.
are. I'm like, yes. Oh, so good.
Okay, our last question before we move on to our money moment segment, is just like, what are you guys hoping for, over the next couple years? What are the goal? Do you guys have goals for the next couple years? Like, what, looking forward, what's on the horizon?
Well, I'd say for payment for placements, I feel like obviously growth in getting more student advocates, but especially non-student advocates involved, so that we can develop some expertise, that can connect with others and teach people and share practices and how to find ways to get students paid. Because it is tricky and there's not one answer. It's so specific to regions, states, organizations, the type of work that's being done. So really growing our non-student advocate base is huge. Also, I think, finding a way to maybe bring in some funding for ourselves to be able to boost the work that we're doing. And I mean, I would love a situation where we would be able to pay students who are advocating as a part of the P4P work, but that is a heavy lift. And so that's some things that, I feel like the P4P movement has. And we're also building partnerships and want to see those grow and see what other areas of advocacy we can really uplift at the same time. So for the P4P movement, that's what I'm thinking. Anything else you can think of, Pilar, for P4P as a whole?
Yeah, I think I'm a researcher. It's one of the things that I do. And so what I would love is to one day have enough chapters in the US and with our international buddies go to the IFSW, International Federation of Social Work, and present on why social work students should be paid like yesterday, I see international cooperation. I see this moving beyond social work. I love the fact that social workers will be spearheading this, but I also love the fact that this could be for other professions, for other practices that are considered feminized labor. Let's help each other. Let's lift each other up. Let's do this together.
I love that.
That's great.
Aiden, for you personally, what professionally, what's next for you?
Yeah, well, I call myself an organizational social worker, which I know is not a common label for social workers. I see it as a fun flavor of macro social work. And, I've along the lines of, P4P advocacy and the work we do here, I'm really excited to find ways to uplift not just the communities being served, but uplift everyone through the work experience. And so I'm really excited to see how I can, better live out my gifts of supporting organizational systems and operations so that it's exciting and fulfilling and healthy work for the individuals who are doing it, for employees. And then that transfers over to the communities that are being served. What we do as professionals models behavior for everyone else. And so, and going back to the discussion on students, like that's why it's so huge how students are treated and supported, and the expectations that are set. That's the foundation of them as a social work professional. And so modeling that behavior, and that a lot of, I think there's so much power in like operational and organizational development. And so that's where I see myself, is working in any spaces that allow me to exercise those gifts.
Love that. What about you, Pilar?
So I identify as a social justice worker very purposely because without the justice, there is no social work. And ideally, I see myself helping to unionize the social work workforce because that is also long overdue.
Very much.
I was curious if this is, yes, okay. So, yes.
Unionization is brewing.
Yes. Mm,
I
we're
love
getting
it.
loud.
Yeah, no, we definitely need it. And I love,
We do.
you know,
Hmm.
this podcast is about kind of this money and social work conversation, but it also is kind of highlighting the cool things that social workers are doing and just giving students and just other professionals exposure to other things that we just didn't talk about in school, you know? Like, yeah, we talk about advocacy in school, and I don't know, but just something as big as this and what you guys are involved in, I think is just so inspiring. So, yeah, just really appreciate you guys, coming on and
Yeah.
sharing your story.
Yeah, thank you so much for making the time to come on and being so vulnerable and open. We would love to hear your money moment because we also are talking about like finances too on this podcast. So if you guys have your money moment, we would love to hear it. Again, it could be like a money win, a money challenge, something you learned new about money and finances. So yeah.
Sure. So my money moment actually took place when I was in college, and I bring it up because I had to recently remind myself of it. When I was in college, I had a part-time job on the weekends at this hair place, and I needed to be able to afford textbooks. And I would be on my feet like 12 hours a day, Saturday and Sunday. And I remember asking for a raise, and the manager just looking at me and being like, "You think you're worth a certain amount of money?"
Ooh.
And I snapped back and I said, "No, I know I'm worth a lot more than you can even afford. You're lucky that I'm working for you."
All right.
And I bring that up as my money moment because I think when I started my social work education, there was a moment where I got lost, and they talk a lot about socializing students, and I had forgotten that. And then it was like a snap. It was like, oh, wait, I'm not that person. Screw this. I'm in it for all of it, the outcome
Yes.
and the income.
Mm, yes.
She said it. Yep.
She said
Yeah.
it.
And I think it's just an important reminder for us as social workers and just as people who identify as women and people of color and all of those identities that it's okay for us to advocate for ourselves to be paid what we deserve. Like you're not a terrible person or social worker or human for asking for more money. So I appreciate you, yeah, saying that. Okay, what you got, Aiden?
I guess I'll say my money moment recently. So my husband and I, starting a couple of years ago, every year we do an annual review of the year together, and it's kind of fun. We have like snacks, and I build like a nerdy PowerPoint, but it has pictures from the past year, like
That's
things
so
we can be
cute.
grateful for
I
and
love
things that
that.
are tough. And my husband, who has his MBA, he does the financial portion. So he looks at financials, like what happened this last year financially, what's upcoming, what do we want to prioritize this year? And one area was our credit cards had a little bit too much on them. And we were like, and we had assumed we probably spent too much money, like, going out to eat, and we shouldn't have put that on the credit card and all the things. And I was like, I don't know. Let's dig into those weeds of that. And so we dug in a little further, and then I realized I was like, some of that debt was on things that we had to get done that were non-negotiable, that it was like, we had to do that. And other things were these like, concert tickets that I'm like, that was like a lifetime memory that I'm like, if I had to pay that off forever, that was totally worth it. And so it wasn't, once we dug into the weeds, it was really enlightening because it wasn't what we assumed. And
Mhm.
so I'm glad we dug into those weeds, and just to like loop it right back on to P4P because I got to do
Yes.
that.
Yeah, you do.
It,
I love it.
I mean, like, I just think about people who are building budgets, particularly at nonprofits or agencies and organizations that hire students. Look at those weeds, dig into those weeds, reassess those weeds, which I mean like budgets, the fine details of budgets, to be able to build money for students and for
Mhm.
learning, because
Mhm.
that money, like, our worth isn't equally scaled by money, but it allows us to lead healthy lives with the resources and time and energy we need to have balance and be able to keep ourselves, happy, healthy, and fulfilled. And that's meaningful. So
Mhm.
yeah, so that was my money moment.
Awesome. Thank
So
you.
good.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I know that's, vulnerable to be like, yeah, we had credit card debt this year, and also the the fact that you were able to see like what did we spend this on? This was an experience of a lifetime, right? I
Hmm.
think that's an important part of managing your money is spending things that really are valuable to you. So, yeah, that's awesome. Where can people find P4P and all of the cool things that you guys are doing?
So they can absolutely go to the Payment for Placements website, which is payment for the number four placements.org. We also have a survey that is geared towards practicing social workers that are not currently students, to be able to give us some thoughts on what they think needs to be done to advocate for paid student placements, and to get looped into our email distribution list for the Advocacy Alliance that we have.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you guys so much. I know this conversation is going to be really appreciated by many people, and so yeah, thank you for your time and
Thank you so
for
much.
advocating
Yeah.
for our profession because we need it. We need help.
Yeah.
We need help out here.
Well, thank you for having us on, and for
Yes, thank
having,
you.
yeah, for having the space to talk about these topics. I also want to plug, which we should have plugged earlier, our Instagram. Go on Instagram, find Payment for Placements, follow us there, follow us on LinkedIn. We're on
Yes.
almost all the social medias, so follow us
Yep.
there.
I'll have all those in the show notes and the affiliated, blog posts for this episode. So thanks everyone for listening, and we'll be back in 2 weeks.